Hello, everyone. My name is Helen Apila. I'm with Femnet.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon. Sorry, my name is Rachel from Femnet. Thank you.
Okay, all right. So we can see everyone who's online. We won't ask for introductions, but I just wanted to recognize Leketang from I don't know whether she's from South Africa or Lesotho, but she was the first one to come online. So I really wanted to give her because she was the first person to come online. So she's the only one who are just allowed to introduce herself and where she's coming from. So Leketang, just tell us your name and where you're from. Can you unmute her? You're muted.
Hi, everybody.
Okay, you're fine.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, my name is Deketseng Motlakwana Motopi. I'm from the Commission for Gender Equality in South Africa.
Wow. Okay. Thank you so much. So given our time, I will go straight in, but I also wanted to thank HIFO's East Africa office. This is where we are. So they facilitated us this facility for us to host the webinar. So I thought it would be great for us just to also appreciate them for their support. So today this is the first in a series of webinars on Beijing+25. We all know that Beijing+25, the review process started last year and it is building momentum. And essentially this webinar is to find out what has been the progress and also to find out how we can engage as a movement from the Africa perspective and also what is going on, but to also get ideas from you in terms of how you are engaging and how you want this movement for the Beijing+25 to be inclusive. So I'll just start by maybe just briefly going through what has happened and why it's important for us to be really galvanizing around Beijing+25. So like I said, the review for Beijing, let me just start by just giving a short background in terms of how African women have been in the forefront for contributing to the global agenda. So from the Third World Conference on Women in Nairobi in 1985, this is the conference which resulted in the Nairobi Looking Forward strategies, to the fourth conference on women, which was held in Beijing, which then in 1995, and this is the one which we have been reviewing. So since 1995, there hasn't been another Women's World Conference. There was a lot of debate on whether in 2020 we should or we should not have a Women's World Conference. And it was agreed that because of a lot of backlash, a lot of the current state we have right now in the world did not allow for us to open up the declaration and have another world conference because there was so much which was at stake. So the decision was to have a high political engagement, which would lead to the UNGA, to the UN General Assembly in September in 2020. So that would be the ultimate, there'll be a session with the heads of state where we want the heads of state to recommit to the gender goals. So what we are doing right now is to build a lot of momentum towards September 2020. So in doing that, Africa was very prominent. It was represented by, some of you might know her, her name is Ms. Gertrude Mongela. So she was alongside other African women. So when you look at the Beijing 12 critical areas, we can even be proud to say from an Africa perspective, we pushed for the girl child. Some of the critical areas, Africa was very prominent in pushing that declaration. So it's that important for us. And as we move to September 2020 for the UN General Assembly, there are a series of activities that are going to happen. So let me start from the activities that have already happened. So this year, at the Commission on the Status of Women in New York at the CSW, UN Women had a session where they were explaining the different advocacy strategies that the different countries and the different movements could actually work on. So within UN Women, there is the Civil Society Division, which is the one leading to ensure that civil society voices is actually part of the process. So UN Women is supporting all the civil society engagement, and in terms of coordinating, there's going to be a global coordinating group, which is hosted by UN Women, but also at a sub-regional level, there'll be sub-regional consultations. So just to step back a bit, each country had guidelines sent to them in September last year to prepare their national report. So currently, I think we have about 20 countries. So far, we have 20 countries which have submitted their reports. So countries submit their reports to the to ECA, which is in Addis, and we'll share the links so that you can see whether or not your country has submitted a state report. So once countries have submitted the state, so this is the state report for each country. They were given a deadline of the 31st of May, but we haven't seen all the reports. So I think globally about 75 or so countries have submitted. And from Africa, we have about 20. So it keeps rolling on. And sometimes today is 20, tomorrow you find maybe another country has submitted their report. So this is an overview in terms of where the process started and where the process will end. So I'll zero in terms of the within the Africa region, in terms of how we are organizing and coordinating. And let me start with the first question of why Femnet, because that's a question which a lot of people were asking. So Femnet has been very central in terms of, in fact, Femnet was actually created out of the third Women's World Conference after the Nairobi Looking Forward Conference, which was held in Nairobi. So Femnet, including a lot of other regional organizations, which were actually born out of the Beijing process. So we have been consolidating the civil society reports for Beijing+5, 10, 15, 20. So we are also coordinating the Africa Civil Society reports for Beijing+25. But this year, we really want to make sure that in terms of the coordination process, we are as inclusive as possible. So it's just not about engaging our members who are Femnet members, but ensuring that the civil society in its diversity is also engaged in the process. And this is why we are really excited to be working with each and every one of you, where we want the activists to be there as well, the young women, women with disability, all the different movements to be part of this Beijing Plus process. Another element around the Beijing Plus process is to where countries are also reporting on CEDAW and where countries are also reporting on the SDGs, to see how do we harmonize this review process so that as we do as many consultations as possible, we're also incorporating the other reporting processes. It could be reporting on Maputo Protocol, on CEDAW, on SDGs. And I will share with you a presentation on how these processes actually, you can actually correlate if it's critical, if it's a particular critical area, for example, on ending gender-based violence. Countries report on it in CEDAW, they report on it under SDGs, they also report on it under Maputo Protocol, as well as Beijing. So it's saying, how do we harmonize the reporting process? So in terms of the regional reporting, so UNECA is coordinating the Africa Regional Review process. So this includes both civil society as well as the state reports. And this is where you find whether or not your country has reported. And then there are also, we know that not all countries are open in terms of allowing civil society to be part of the national report. And we did a quick online survey which already showed that some of the countries which reported were not as inclusive. Some countries did consult civil society, but we do know that with a lot of shrinking space, there are certain things that some countries might not be comfortable in terms of bringing out. So there's an opportunity for civil society to also submit parallel reports. And the reason why we are no longer calling them shadow reports is because when we say parallel report, it's an alternative report to the state report. And the parallel report is actually submitted to UN Women. So UN Women has already received NGO civil society parallel reports. So within your country, you can actually submit a parallel report directly to UN Women, and we'll also share the contact details as well as the process. So in addition to that, together with NGO CSW, which is a global representation of NGOs for the UNC CSW committee, there's what's called NGO CSW. So the NGO CSW has developed what we are calling NGO civil society guidelines for reporting. So we'll also share with you these guidelines, and these guidelines are to help civil society to submit like a uniform kind of like report. So if Zambia, if Liberia, if Sierra Leone, if civil society use a particular framework in terms of reporting, it makes it easier when we are getting the information at the regional as well as the global level. So we'll also share with you that. So another way in terms of engagement, we'll be also having webinars. So this is the first webinar for civil society. We'll be doing more and more webinars, and would really love you to also do webinars within your country or with whatever constituency, so that it's just not us at a regional level, but we want these webinars to be done at country level as well, or with whatever constituency. So you can have, for example, women with disabilities, you can have your specific webinar where you discuss the critical issues, and from that you maybe want to submit a report which is specific to your constituency. So we want to be as inclusive and get as many voices and do this process as consultatively as possible. So this is the first webinar. We'll be having a Francophone. We realize because of language, it's easier to have a separate one if it's Francophone, Anglophone. And if there's any one of you who wants to even have a Lusophone one or to host a webinar in Arabic, this is something we can facilitate. We'll just share with you the materials, and then we can provide the platform, and then you can have the webinars. Because you also realize in terms of language, there's always exclusion, particularly for Lusophone, and also our sisters who speak Arabic. Then the other process that we are also coordinating is we also coming up with what we want to call the Africa Beijing+25 reference group. So this is a reference group where in this reference group, we want to have 50% at least of the participants to be young people and to be representative of the diversity of civil society. So we want this reference group to have like a regional representation of organizations, activists, so that we are consulting and we are hearing the voices from not the usual, just the women's groups, but also other civil society, because the Beijing Platform for Action is a political declaration. It's not binding like Maputo Protocol or CEDAW. So we want to make sure that because it's a political document. We need to create that momentum and get as many allies as possible. So the Africa Beijing reference group will share more information also in terms of how you can be part of it and how you can actually reach as many constituencies as possible. So this will include North Africa, East Africa, Southern Africa, Central Africa. We want a representation of as many members, of as many groupings as possible to be part of this Africa reference group. And then NGO-CSW is also inviting women's rights advocates and activists to submit their Beijing stories and experiences. So this will be compiled into an online book, into 2 online books. Now, my memories and messages for the next generation, this will be the book 1. For people who went to Beijing, people who experienced Beijing, and we want to know during that era, when we had the Fourth World Conference, what was happening, what did they push for, what were their challenges, how are those challenges still relevant today? Then the second book is My Issues, Hopes and Dreams. So this book, second online book, is targeted to young women to share their own stories, their dreams, and their hopes. You see, young women might not identify with what it is to fight for the right to go to school, for example, for education, for equality, because 25 years later, they are in a system which is allowing for girls' education. But we want to know, beyond Beijing+25, what are the critical areas? There were 12 critical areas identified in 1985. What are the critical areas for women and girls? What are the critical areas? If we look at the African population, almost close to what? They say close to 41% of the current African population is below the age of 15. So even in our engagement, it's how to even get the adolescent girls to have a voice, to also speak to this Beijing process. So we'll also be sharing the links on how you can be part. We want African voices to be part of these online books. There's been a lot of interest, a lot of contribution from Asia, a lot of contribution from South America. And the contributions do not necessarily have to be, it can be a letter, it can be the form of poetry, spoken word, any artistic way. It can be how you are visualizing. So it's just not a 4-page, but just sharp, a paragraph, very exciting way of expressing what it was. I was speaking to someone who went to Beijing, and they said when they went to Beijing, they had kangas from Africa. The Africa group was so colorful. And she was saying she still has it. I'm like, 25 years, people still have that. They still have the pictures. And so those are the things we want to share, and we want her story to be documented. So I'll just end this session by just sharing some of the upcoming, what to watch out for. So I spoke about how this process really picked momentum at this year's CSW. In April, we had the Tunis Gender Forum, which was coordinated by UNDP with a lot of support from CEDA Sweden. And then in June, we had the Women Deliver Conference, where there was also a session on Beijing+25. So there have been a series of different platforms and different meetings where people have been discussing about Beijing+25. So what is upcoming is that in August, UN Women Africa will be holding an Africa Youth meeting. So we'll share with you more details. And as part of this, we also want you to mobilize as many women from your regions to participate in this Africa Youth meeting, which will be focusing specifically on Beijing+25. And in October, the African Union will be the African Union Ministerial Meeting, where the Ministers of Gender will be meeting at the AU. And this will also have the STC, the Standing Technical Committee on Gender in Addis. And then at the African level in November, 2019, there's going to be the regional consultation. So UNECA will be now coordinating and consolidating the consultations for both from civil society, both from the youth, both from the different constituencies, as well as the ministerial, and this will be a regional consultation. But prior to this regional consultation, we would want to have a CSO Beijing+25 regional review and validation of the Africa CSO report on Beijing+25. So this will be in November. The dates have not been shared yet exactly. But also in November in Nairobi, there's going to be ICPD+25. So for those who work particularly in sexual reproductive health and rights, we'll be having a global meeting here in Nairobi, and there will be also some intersections and a space to discuss Beijing+25. In South Africa, the Zanele Mbeki Development Foundation will be hosting 1,000 women from 33 African countries in the African Women in Dialogue. And within that space, there will be mostly grassroots and young women, and there will be also a session on Beijing+25. And this will all culminate to the CSW meeting, the 64th Commission on the Status of Women, which will be March 2020 next year. And there will also be a civil society global forum for gender equality. This will be hosted by the governments of, in July, it will be in France, hosted by the government of France as well as the government of Mexico. So this will be a forum, a global forum, which will involve all civil society, all governments. It's not an interministerial, but it's a whole forum to showcase what is happening in terms of Beijing, the achievements, the celebration, but also what should be done to ensure there's recommitment and there's political will and drive for Beijing+25. So this will all end in September with the UN General Assembly in September 2020. We'll try as much as possible to get any other days or any other events on what will be happening, so that as much as possible we can infuse and have a huge drive on Beijing+25. Okay, so I will stop at this end. I don't know with my colleagues, is there anything that you'd like to add? Is there anything that I didn't talk about? Okay. Okay. So for now, we just open for any questions, if you want any clarifications, and then after we get any questions or we'll share as much as we can. We also want to hear from you in terms of, is there anything that you think we can do differently? How do we get to reach the diverse constituencies? And how can we make this engagement exciting? How can we have the momentum? And most importantly, how do we get young women to be involved in this? So I'll ask Rachel, who just moderate in terms of your question. So if you have a question, you wave. Yes, you can wave and then we'll unmute.
Okay, so maybe just to request, if anyone has a question or a comment, then we'll give you the floor, if that's okay. Yes, Likit Singh. Did I get your name right?
Yes, you did. Thanks.
Please go
Thanks
ahead.
for a very. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? The audio is
Yes,
just
we can
pretty
hear
bad
you.
from my side. Oh, okay. Yes. Thank you so much for a very informative presentation. Now I can't see. Now I can't see you. I see somebody from somewhere. But can you hear me still?
Kindly, if you could speak a little bit louder, probably. I'm not sure whether it's the network.
Oh, okay. Oh,
Yes.
okay. Thank you. I got lost a bit there. I was saying thank you so much for the presentation. It's really informative. And firstly, before I ask my question, Wooly, are you going to be able to avail all the information that you just presented on, especially on the dates that you spoke to? And another question is maybe a comment is that remember civil society, I say that this is a civil society platform. And as the Commission for Gender Equality, we are a national human rights institution. So what we do, we are also very active in the process of monitoring the implementation of Beijing being one of yes, implementation. Now I can't see your faces, but it's fine. I can if you can still hear me, it's fine. So my question was, are you going to be able to lobby other gender national human rights institution to join in this? Because what we do, monitor what both the government and civil society do, and then we produce the report that speaks to which I would call it the parallel report, as you as the presenter put it. So my question was, are you going to also, through this platform, going to be able to lobby those other national human rights institutions that I know that you do have the Gender Commission in Kenya, we have it in where is that, Zimbabwe, and other countries that have, because we really have to keep the momentum going. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your questions. Any other question? Maybe we take 2 or 3 more and then we can. Nyambura, yes, I can see your hand up. Go ahead, Nyambura.
Hi, Rachel. Thank you for the opportunity. My question is with regards to LBQ women. I was interested to know whether there are any organizations that are organizing LBQ women in Africa to participate in the process. Thank you.
We can't hear you, Nyambura, sorry. Is it possible to just take again your question?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
You can, okay. So my question is with regards to LBQ women in Africa. So I was asking if there are any organizations that are organizing LBQ women's participation in the process.
Okay, thank you, Nyambura. Any other question?
Yes, this is Onzo.
Hello, I have a question.
Please go ahead. Please go ahead, Esther.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. So I have one question, and I wanted to find out if the process for the African CSO report has started, and if it has started, how can we then engage in that? Because you've spoken about the validation workshop that is coming in November. So I wanted to find out if that process has already started. That's one. Then the second question I have is in terms of what you said, how different categories of women and girls can be able to mobilize themselves and come up with a report. Will that be able to be shared, or has that process for other, let's say, young women groups, have they been engaged through Femnet to, mobilize each other and come up with their own report?
Thank you, Miss Esther. Maybe we can take the last one for this time, and then we respond, and then we can get another second batch of questions. Any other question?
Yes, this is Onzo. I have a question. Hello, this is Zonziwo.
Yes, Zone. Yes, please go ahead.
Oh, thank you so much, and thank you, Memory, for the outline. It's quite explicit. I think my question will just follow up with what Esther just said. Yeah, I'm speaking both as a participant now as well as a cabinet member, where I would want to understand the difference. Oh, hello.
Zone,
Hello.
we can't quite get you. Please, would you take that again?
Yeah, my question, I've got two questions. The first is in regards to the constitution of the referendum. So I would like to know how many in terms of number, and also in terms of number, the ratio for adolescent girls and young women, because most of the times we tend to fit, cluster adolescent girls under young women. So I would like to know what is Mnet's reflection on that, to see that there is an equal representation of all these classes of all categories of women. And my second question is what is thinking about consolidating other reports or activities that has been done at the level of national level on the Beijing+25 to build on all this report in submitting a continental report. I don't know if I was clear, but I can hear a lot of noise in the background. Thank you. I can type my question if it wasn't clear.
Yes, Zone. Zone, we were able to hear you. Isabella?
I also have a question.
Is that you? Can we take your question, Isabella? Is that okay?
It's okay. Let someone else. I'll ask a bit later.
Okay, perfect. Then we can respond to this first batch of questions as we look forward to the second batch. Thank you very much.
Okay, so thank you so much. Let me start with the first question on whether we will engage with other human rights institutions like the gender commissions. So as part of the engagement process, we are also targeting all the gender commissions. So the gender commissions can actually submit an alternative report. So they can submit a specific report directly to UNECA as well as the Gender Commission, but we also want to work with all the gender commissions. So one of the things that we had already started doing is mapping out which countries have a gender commission. And from that gender commission, were they part of the state reports? Are they interested in having an alternative report? But as gender commissions, because most gender commissions were established even after Beijing, so they have a huge role in terms of actually presenting an alternative report. So definitely, and they can actually use the guidelines. So we'll be sharing this with you. We also wanted to find out if we can have a convening with all the regional gender commissions, so we can have the different gender commissions from the different countries to actually share what are their experiences in terms of recording and submitting independent reports, because they're just not monitoring Beijing, but CEDAW, they're monitoring all this, and they've got critical information that will be required for this reporting. So definitely that. So we'll share all the materials. Actually, we'll share what we want to call a toolkit, because we want this information to be shared at national level with all your constituencies. So it's information. We'll also be having a page under Femnet as well as NGO CSW once the page is on, so that you can also have as many materials as you can. The other question from Nyambura was, to what extent are we engaging the LGBTQ movement, and whether they can submit a separate parallel report. So we are definitely want to work with LGBTQ movement and make sure that they're also part of this process, and how they can submit a parallel report using the same guidelines as well. They can join the mainstream women's movement. We really are targeting especially particular minority groups, key populations, sex workers, we really want them to be part of the Beijing plus 25 process. So if you are working with any of these groups or if they are part of your constituencies, we want to also work with you and see if you can support them to engage in this process and to actually feel that the space that we are creating is also conducive for them to report for the Beijing. And there was another question around the Africa CSO report, whether the process has started. So yes, this is the actual beginning of the process. So as FEMNET, what we are doing is we've started gathering information. You find information from as many constituencies as possible. So Zone, for example, from Cameroon had a CSO consultation. So we are taking that information from that report and we are compiling it into the regional report. And this will also be part of what we are calling the Africa Reference Group. So we have an Africa Reference Group which will help in terms of consolidating information from the different countries. And we are also working with UN Women country offices where we want them to identify who in each country is leading in terms of the parallel report. So we would love to hear as many. So currently we are mapping and we've received information from, I think, about 23 countries in terms of which civil society organization is leading. But you find for some countries, a particular civil society, and we started with usually the civil society organization which led the last Beijing Class 25 process. But we've seen there have been so many other new players, and some players may not necessarily identify with the CSO organization that might be the one leading on the process. So this is why we want to open it up and not say just not FEMNET members, not the usual organizations or network, but where possible, it's actually better to have a collective civil society report from a particular country. And you find with most country consultations, even from civil society, there hasn't been as much engagement with a specific focus on looking at young women. And in our next webinar, we'd really love to share the case of Cameroon in terms of how they engaged and managed to reach in each province the young women and also have grassroots women. They used a particular, what you call is a formula, but the criteria which they use, I think it can be replicated in other countries. We shouldn't be reinventing the wheel, but where possible, how can we also use this platform to share best practices? And then in terms of what quota, so within our network as FEMNET, we don't have a huge quota of young women. So we are also looking for young women movements, young women networks, as you know, young women led to be part of this process. So we also encouraging you, Zona wanted to know what quota. We want 50%, we say 50% of all consultations should have young women, but we're not limiting it to 50%, but as much as possible, we want to have young women. So we are urging everyone to be deliberate about engaging young women. And if you do know about certain networks, you can also share and so that we can also work with them. So the youth conference that will be happening in August is a very great platform for young women in particular to be part of. So we'll share more information on the link. And we actually were having a conversation today with UN Women on how they can make it more inclusive as possible. Now, there was another question around consolidating national reports. So as part of the regional report, we've already started consolidating national CSO reports. We don't have a lot. We haven't received a lot. Most of the countries were waiting for their state reports so that they can see what is missing. But we already say you don't have to wait whether or not your country has reported, because if they have not consulted you, or even if they've consulted you, from a civil society perspective, we also want to consolidate that information. And I think one of the strategies that we'll use with the Africa Reference Group is to have for each critical area, which is one of the strategies being used at the national level, is to look at which organizations are working, for example, under the critical area on ending violence against women, and can they then work and give us a regional report. If it's on the critical area of women in political participation, which are the organizations? So one of the strategies which is easier to come up with a report is to look at each thematic area, but then also then look at what are the other issues that are not addressed in those 12 critical areas, issues around cyber violence, issues around trafficking, migration. How do you also then bring those issues into the report as well? Okay, so we'll take another round of questions, comments, and how is our time? Okay, good. Okay, so we don't have much, 5 minutes?
Yes. Well, thank you very much, Memory. And now we'll move to a second set of questions or comments. Anyone who would want to ask a question or to comment, please.
Can you hear us?
Sharifa from Malawi.
Oh my God. Hello.
Sharifa from Malawi, I have a question.
Hi, Sharifa from Malawi. We can hear you. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Memory, for the presentation, and thank you for your clarifications and on the answers you've provided. My question is actually centered on country reports versus the CSO report. Memory mentioned about how political this document is. So I just wanted to know, how assured are we that the reports shared by CSOs are going to be consolidated in the main reports, but also what mechanisms are going to be put on the ground to make sure that these reports have been consolidated? Thank you.
Hi, Memory.
Hello.
Hi.
Can you hear us?
Thank you very much. Please go ahead.
Have you?
Okay, so this is Kebe from UN Women Isaro. I hope you meant for us to go ahead, or is there someone else? Hi, Memory.
Not yet. I have seen the colleagues from Ethiopia, unfortunately, are having an issue to sign in. But yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, okay, great. Okay, so I'm here with my colleague Brenda. Thank you very much for the background information this morning and also now. We are learning a lot. Thank you so much, and to all the friends who joined. My colleague Brenda will update everyone on the upcoming youth conference. But I just wanted to flag, from the questions raised from the friends regarding the parallel reports, the LGBTQ, and then also, the gender commissions, and I'm sure others also will come forward, asking for parallel reports. The more reports we have, the less, the influencing power of, the separate reports. We are targeting almost exactly the same kind of audience. Governments, as you know, are resisting having parallel and shadow reports for the very reason. Because at the end of the day, we have to convince them. It's them to get their buy-in is key. So when they will receive, various reports, I think it will dilute the strength of the report. So as much as possible, we would encourage, for the civil society to be able to capture all those voices in one parallel report instead of submitting various reports, which will really defeat the whole purpose. Then on the issue of mobilization of young people, there is always the challenge of going out of our comfort zone. We always invite almost the same group of people. Yeah. Maybe one criteria we have is, the age, but we have to go beyond that in the era of SDGs. How about traditional, people, people that we cannot, even there are no cars to reach them in some parts of Africa. Are they not going to be part of this Beijing+25? How about people in the slums? How about other groups, they may not be, the glamorous kind of people to bring to conference halls because they may not speak fluent, but without changing their lives, there is no change, there is no universality of SDGs. So it's extremely important Not necessarily that everyone has to come to a conference hall, but somehow to bring their voices to the conference hall is extremely important. So I just want to highlight that and to put the challenge, to all the civil society organizations and others who joined, today's webinar, but mainly to Femnet, who is leading the process, to please be innovative, to bring those voices to those, meetings, and by way of doing that we capture their issues in the recommendation documents going to the General Assembly, etc. It's extremely important. Now I will ask my colleague Brenda to brief us on the upcoming youth conference that UN Women is supporting.
Hello, everybody. So on the youth conference that UN Women is convening later in August, we are working with our country offices all across Africa, and we are targeting youth between the ages of 15 and 35. So we have a set criteria that has been sent out to our country offices, and the country offices is working to, to get country representations within that criteria. So the main agenda we want to find out is whether the young people really understand what Beijing +25 means to them, and what is their feedback. And whatever is generated from this conference will be reported at the All Africa meeting in October, later in Addis. But in case of any information, this will be channeled through UN Women country offices. Yes, I don't know whether. Yeah, that's about it. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kebe and Brenda.
Hello.
Danielle, is that you? You want to go ahead?
Hello, it's Fedis.
Fedis.
Hello.
Okay. Please
Yeah,
go ahead, Fedis.
Okay, I have a question and a concern. I work for the Anglican Church across Africa, and listening to what the briefing that we've received and some of the questions, I'm asking whether in the report writing processes we have been able to include the faith community, understanding that they have a very important role to play also in the whole of this process, and whether it's possible also for us to be part of, to join in writing this, the civil society reports, the parallel reports. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Is that Reverend Fedis?
Yes.
Thank you. Oh,
yes.
Thank you so much. That's a very important aspect you're bringing in. So would we get maybe a last question before we can do a response or reaction? Any comment, question? Okay. Is someone trying to join in? Okay. Maybe.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, this is Mabel from Sonke.
Okay, please go ahead.
Just adding an event to the events that Memory was presenting earlier. The SVRI conference happening in Cape Town would be another good opportunity for us to discuss Beijing +25. For those who will be attending, I think it will be a good opportunity that we can use as well.
Thanks, Mabel. Just when is the conference? It's the sexual gender-based violence. When is this?
Yes, it's August. I can email you the dates, but I know it's in August.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much, Mabel. I think it would be a great platform as well. So if you can just also send us anything that may be happening in your region, because we don't have, there are not enough resources. So any convening that's going to happen now until September next year, let's see how we can take as much advantage of it. I wanted to respond to Reverend Fedis about the faith-based community. So in the last consultations, we've also worked with the different faith-based community so that they can also their voice be captured, the faith-based as well as the traditional leaders. So we really would like, and if we also want you to be part of the community in terms of getting as much information and also incorporating your voice in that. And I think most of the questions, Sharifa, you asked a very difficult question around whether or not when you, by doing the shadow report, whether they are protected. I don't know if I got your question right. How do we make sure? I think the good thing about working and with civil society as a collective is that you are also able to bring all those voices together, so there isn't specific targeting. But the issues that have been left out of the state reports, it's important to work as a collective as much as possible, because when you do work as a collective and you're able to put the diverse voices, I think this is what we really want to push for as much as possible.
This is the justification for this regional report.
And this is the justification for the regional report. This is why we have a CSO report, so that the voices that might have been missing or the voices that are not able to be included in the state reports are also voices, and those are the issues that actually come out. Yeah, I think that's it. I don't know if I missed anything, but yeah.
Okay, yes. So if we could get maybe the last final set of questions, if that's okay.
Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Kerigo Odada, and I'd like to speak to the issue with regard to engaging young people. So maybe my take would be if we could adopt an approach similar to what the UN Women have adopted with regard to calling out to young people to set up the Beijing+25 Youth Task Force. So if we could have a regional one that maybe we could set up a regional one in Africa that would spearhead this whole process within the regional context, I think it would help to rally young women within the continent to take lead in this particular process, because most of the time we don't see young people at the forefront of this entire movement. So if we have them also involved, I think they will play a key role in getting other young people to the table. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Danielle, is that you? You have a question?
No, it's... Oh, sorry.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Yeah, this is Zone again. I'm just responding to the UN Women's Youth Forum, which will be coming up in August. So my concern is, would participation only be limited to young women recommended by country offices? Because I believe there are some country offices where information will not be very available to the public or to these young women. And given that we do not want the same faces, in this space, so I'm just concerned in terms of recommendation of participation and involvement. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. Kebe, are you there? Brenda from UN Women, if you could maybe respond to Zone's question.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, so thank you. This is excellent question. But, the way we work with our country offices, of course, country offices have to consult on the ground with partners, which include civil society organizations, government, faith-based, etc., etc. So it will be in consultation with them that they are going to identify the 4 participants. And, if there are additional, participants to be nominated, if they can be supported. We have not, as such, restricted the number of participants per country. So I hope I answered your question. So it's not just UN Women itself directly identifying. Women is facilitating, consulting with partners on the ground in your respective countries to nominate the 4 participants. If you have a better idea or concern, if you don't mind to communicate that, send us email. I'll bring it to the attention of our regional director and, through her to the country representatives to make it more inclusive. Thank you.
Thank you, Kebe, for your response. And now,
I also wanted to comment also in terms of the youth engagement. I think, Kego, you had some very exciting ideas on how we can engage with the youth. And so from civil society, we would want as much as possible to have, if it's going to be Africa Youth, so that we don't do like a parallel CS or youth task force. But I think where possible, it would be great to work with the UN Women so that we have one strong youth task force for the youth. But I think if there's still room, or if people feel that we should have a separate one, I think definitely within the Africa Reference Group, would really want to have a huge youth representative, and within the Africa Group Reference Group to have a task force which would really drive to ensure that there's engagement of young people. But as much as possible, we wouldn't want to have like a parallel process. I think there are also some countries which might not have UN Women country offices, or might not know the contacts of the UN country offices. So we'll ask maybe Kebe to share more details in terms of who you can consult, so that maybe it can be covered by the multi-country offices and things like that. So we'd really love to get those voices out there. But as much as possible, also minimize having different parallel structures. But if there's a platform, we want the civil society voices there as well. Yeah.
okay, we have around 15 more minutes to go. So maybe just the last set of questions. I'm just seeing some people joining in. Any question, any comment? Yes, I can see your big smile.
Hello.
Hello.
Sorry, I had to join late. I was in another meeting.
Yes, please go ahead.
I don't have a question, just saying hello.
Hello, can you hear me?
Sorry. Any other questions?
Hello.
Final comments before we wrap up and maybe get a way forward on how we want to move from here?
Hi, Rachel.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Yes.
How are you?
I'm very well,
2 questions.
Yes.
2 questions. Is there anything that is being done at national level in terms of the preparation of the PSO state report, or are we just doing one big regional report? And if so, how can we join in, or who will be the host?
Sorry, we didn't actually get which country are you from? Caroline? Sorry? Which country are you from? You asked about if there's already a process at the national level, at the country. From which country are you coming from?
It's Isabel from Crew, Kenya.
From Crew. Okay, Isabel.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so Isabel, so for Kenya, there are about 20 countries which have already submitted the state reports, and from the state report, the government reports, some governments and some countries engaged with civil society, but some might not have. So in terms of Kenya, I think there's a process where we had a meeting in Women Deliver in June with a couple of CSOs, and we can share with you more information. I think they are planning to have a Kenya National Alternative Parallel Report. I'm not so sure if it's supposed to be led by FIDA Kenya, but also including as many civil society organizations as possible. So we can have a bilateral on that and maybe just share more information.
All right, thank you. I'm looking forward to you guys sharing the information.
Two clarifications from me. One, Memory, is it possible for you to share with us your earlier presentation? That's one, because I sort of joined in late and I missed the beginning of your conversation. And number two, in terms of plugging into the already ongoing processes for a network that may be coming in at this point, what would be the possible entry points? And also in terms of feeding to the global forum for next year, how is that envisioned? Thank you.
Okay, we'll definitely, just like Memory had said, we'll definitely share all the information, her presentation, and also other useful information that we think will be able to help us in the process going forward. And the second question.
Okay, and then in terms of plugging into the ongoing processes, so there are two ways to plug into the ongoing processes. Within your country, we want to, if you want information, for example, I don't know where you're from, but whatever information you'd like, if you want to know which organization is leading in terms of a parallel report, or whether or not civil society in your organization is going to do a parallel report. So what we've been doing that mapping, so we can share with you in terms of maybe you can get in touch with this organization, and also we working with UN Women, the country offices as well. Kebe was also saying that at each country office, they're also working with civil society and also consulting with the different civil societies. So that's the first way to really plug in. Then the second way is we are creating this listserv where we'll be having some online discussions. There's an issue around the online book where you can also talk about your story. You can also get voices from your constituency to be part of that. We'll also be sharing the different calendar of events, if there are any of the events that you can already plan and be part of those events as well. That's also another way to get plugged in. And then for the global forum next year in July in France, so there's a global consultative group, there's a global working group on Beijing+25. So it's got both civil society, it's got activists. Femnet is one of the members of that global group. So whatever information we get in terms of how do we make sure we mobilize participants from the African continent to be part of the global, we'll definitely share that. But as much as possible, we'd really love you to also start thinking if in July, if there are any funding partners, any proposals that you can write, to also include that so that we can support as many people and as many voices can be part of that process. Another element of the global process is so they're also planning to have a huge online platform, so that if you can't join physically in France, but you can also join online. I know it's not the same with movement building. We need to be physical. We need to match and have those, do those actions. There'll be also other joint actions which are happening. I know the 8th of March, there's a call for women not to go to work, a women's strike. So there are different activities and different spaces that you can engage. Yeah, and Rachel from Femnet, if you need any specific question, anything, she'll be the one who will be our contact and she'll be answering that as well. Yeah. Okay, so Anything? Want to say something?
No, I think for me, it's more of emphasizing the fact that Femnet is coordinating the CSO report writing process, and whatever information you'd like to be included in the regional report, please, as much as possible, you feel free and share that information with us. But also, Femnet will be recruiting and having a lead consultant who will be helping us lead the process of writing. And I mean, you watch out for spaces like sub-regional consultations that Femnet is going to be coordinating, the regional consultations. So when we finish the sub-regions, North Africa, South Africa, East Africa, Central Africa, if you miss that opportunity, there will be the regional opportunity for the whole continent where Femnet will be convening. So we have a lot of spaces that Femnet will be coordinating, and we are going to be sharing this regularly, at least every 2 weeks or every week you'll be receiving information, and feel free to share as much as you feel, and also use the opportunity. So when we send out the guidelines, that's a good starting point for you. Look at the guidelines, see what information can you capture using those guidelines and send to us as much as possible, and then also link up with the organizations within your country that are working on this particular issue. Yeah.
Thank you. And so we have 8 more minutes to go. I just want to thank all of you for taking your time out of your very busy schedule to join us in this webinar. We are so excited, we are happy, and we really look forward to this roadmap and us working together and really achieving a lot for now and for the future, and especially for the young people who really have no idea. You know, when you ask them about Beijing, they're like, what is Beijing? I have never heard Beijing. But really, it's important for them to be included in this space because they have so much to offer. They have so much to offer. So thank you very much. We will keep you posted. We'll keep you informed. We'll keep engaging. Expect a lot of information. Please feel free to share with other networks. Involve other people, especially at country level. Involve as many organizations as possible so that you can all work together. And also just working together with UN Women, embrace working with their offices, getting to ask them what information they have to share. So really, we are in this together, and thank you so very much.
Thank you. So this is the end of our webinar. We'll be having subsequent webinars, and we also encourage you to have webinars, meetings, or discussions. I noticed there are people from universities. We also want the students' movement to be part of this. If you are planning to have a public lecture, if you need any information, please feel free. We want to also showcase, like I talked earlier about what Cameroon has done. So we also want to know what you're doing around the Beijing process as well. So if you've done anything or something you're planning, please just share with us. We also want to see to what extent we can also be connecting you with different partners who want to get their voices heard as well. But I think the bottom line is be as inclusive as possible. We want the voices of rural women. We want the voices of LGBTQI community. We want the voices of adolescent girls, women with disabilities. Every voice matters in the Beijing+25 process. We have to make it political enough. It's up to us to make it as powerful to get that noise back and people to know that the women's and gender equality, and we want Africa to be loud. Yes. We cannot afford for Africa not to be loud. So thank you, Asante Sana.
Thank you.
We'll meet next time.
Thank you, and we'll be sharing the recording for future, just so that you can listen up if there's anything that you didn't get. So we'll share all the recordings. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Okay.